So, all right, I'll just turn these down then.
Let's start this evening with how many of you know where Ohio Creek is? Well, that's encouraging. What you're looking at is a picture taken of the Denver South Park and Pacific completed grade, and track was laid on this section. This is at a piece of property called Wilderness Streams 2. It's about 27 miles north of Gunnison in the Ohio Creek Valley. The reason I'm familiar with this area is to the left about 200 yards. My father-in-law built a fishing cabin that we now own and get to use quite often. The mountains in the background are the Anthracites. The valley on the right-hand side is Ohio Creek. The valley on the left-hand side is Packets Creek. And the short little hill in the middle where the road goes up is actually a lateral moraine from two glaciers that came down the valley. And we'll just jump in. I like to think of Ohio Creek as being the the Dangerfield version of the world as far as the South Park is concerned. It really doesn't get any respect. And that's really sad because there are some really unusual features on this line. It probably is less respected because only about half of it was ever operated on, and the rest of it is only about 85% complete. To me, the South Park is a star-crossed railroad. It went everywhere that it wanted to. It usually got there late, and it usually got there by the most diverse route possible. The Rocky Mountain Railroad Club has quite a tie to Ohio Creek. In 1954, Bob Richardson accidentally discovered the grade. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. You can certainly read about it in Richardson's, in the Colorado Railroad Annual number 21, or in Mac Poor's book, the pictorial addition to the South Park. In 1955, Richardson actually discovered the grade by accident. He was out jeeping and drove over Ohio Pass down the Gunnison-Irwin Road, what was left of it, and had to turn around, and the spot he happened to choose to turn around in was part of a railroad grade that he recognized because of the pile of ties that was next to his Jeep. In the early part of 1955, Gunnison County pushed a brand new road across Ohio Pass and down into the valley. And the road used part of the original railroad grade, and in other places it took shortcuts. And in the fall of 1955, Richardson, Mac Poor, Mr. Haley, Peterson, Riley, and Rosari, I hope that's right, took a field trip to explore Richardson's discoveries, and well, the rest is history from that point on. Also want to mention that Dan Edwards' materials are quite helpful in understanding Ohio Pass today, and Tom Klinger's book also. This is the plan that the South Park operated on. The black line is where the South Park was built and completed, but not all at the same time. The red line is what they called the Pacific Extension. And like most railroads that got into the Gunnison Valley, they had to find a way out. The Rio Grande, of course, went down the upper part of the Black Canyon, out through Cimarron and over Cerro Summit. The South Park decided they would go over 10,000-foot Ohio Pass to get out of the valley. This is the General Land Office drawing of the route from Castleton up Ohio Creek and up over the pass. The Ohio Pass is just left as center in section 14 and 15. This drawing was submitted in 1890. This is to solidify the claim to the right-of-way. Construction in Ohio Pass actually had two phases. The preliminary survey was done by Major John Evans. He's not related to John Evans, the governor who envisioned the South Park. The GLO filings were first made in 1880. The private right-of-way was purchased in the same year. Surprisingly, most of the Ohio Creek Valley had already been settled before the South Park was constructed. There was a lot of preempted land, and there were quite a few squatters. In April of 1881, 2 grading contracts were issued. The first one was from Gunnison to Castleton, Castleton to Old Baldwin, and it went to Glover, McClune, and Reed. And their work was finished in the fall of 1881. This is before the South Park even got to Gunnison. They were still working on Alpine Tunnel at the time. The second contract went to Charles H. Lawrence and Associates. They worked from April of 1881 through March of 1882. Lost her picture. Their work was suspended by in the springtime. In 1883, the South Park actually reached Gunnison in the latter part of 1882, but did not begin operations until 1883. Track laying up the valley took place. The original track was laid from Gunnison to Castleton, Castleton to Old Baldwin, and Castleton to end a track at Wilderness Streams 2. There's continued construction that took place in 1886 and 1887, and there was suggested construction that was going to take place in 1892, 1893. And we'll look at all of these as we go through. This is put in for a purpose, and part of it is selfish on my part. All of the land for the first 30 miles of this right-of-way is private property. And I can tell you from personal experience, having someone meet you at the gate with a loaded shotgun is not something you want to enjoy. Most of the land along the old right-of-way today is either large ranches or gated estates. It is clearly marked as private property. These people have put up with four-wheel drive, ATVs, snowmobiles, illegal hunting and fishing for years, and they're pretty tired of it. It's quite easy to make contact with most of the property owners, and most of them are very generous about allowing you on their property. This is Phineas F. Barr. He was the man in charge of all the construction up Ohio Creek. And he's a man you really should get to know because his career in Colorado railroading is very extensive. He came to Colorado in 1878 working for the Santa Fe Railroad. He was responsible for much of the grading and early construction in the Royal Gorge. He moved over to the South Park in 1881. He was the superintendent of construction for the Alpine Tunnel. Later on, he would be in charge of construction of Ohio Creek. And later after that, he constructed the High Line over Boreas Pass and Fremont Pass to Leadville. In 1887, he went back to work for the Santa Fe and helped build what they call the air line between Kansas City and Chicago. And he finished out his career in Minneapolis, St. Paul, building the trolley car system. He also has a grandniece that lives in Canyon City. Well, our trip up Ohio Creek will begin in Gunnison itself. This was the original Denver South Park and Pacific Depot. This is an inbound scrap train with locomotive 268 on the front. At the time, of course, the Rio Grande was operating the branch. This building didn't survive much past the abandonment of the railroad. It was torn down by the Highway Department to expand Highway 50. North of the town, most of the railroad right-of-way for the first 20 miles is in the bottom of the valley. It's a broad valley. And today, most of the right-of-way is used either as, in this section, is used as a city street, county road, private driveway. As you make your way up the valley, after about 3 miles, you travel through areas that look like this on the old right-of-way until you arrive at the Gunnison River bridges. These are the original South Park bridges built in 1882. They are made of iron. They are Lincoln tin construction. The Gunnison Bridge is 2 truss sections, each 128 feet long. At the time these pictures were taken, the bridge had not been rehabilitated. Well, this section of the bridges won't be. The bridge sets on a stone pier in the middle of the river. Most of the river flows on the left-hand side, but in flood season, the second span comes into play. The rafters don't like it because usually at high water, they get snagged. And you can see the link and pin construction that was used for the bridge. I believe that the timbers underneath are the original railroad timbers that hadn't been replaced yet. The owner of the bridge had taken and put logs on top and then a plank roadway on top of that. This is very private property. This gentleman was not at all happy to have me take pictures. This is the Ohio Creek Bridge. It's 82 feet long, and it's only about a quarter mile further up the valley. Excuse me. This bridge has been rehabilitated. All of the wooden beams have been replaced with steel, and the decking is now 6x8 treated timber. And I believe that the bridges together were supposed to be access to a private development. I'm not sure that they're used as that still. This is Ohio Creek still. And this is looking on up the grade, and you can see that in the distance, basically at this time, it was just a farm road. Today, most of this area has been developed into little ranchettes, 5-acre lots, and quite fancy houses, and gated. The first siding up the valley was Vidal's. It was 107 feet long. It was built, it was named after Philip and Regis Vidal. They were two Frenchmen who came into the valley in 1875 and homesteaded. They actually own the earliest water rights on Ohio Creek. And a little further up the valley is Wiley's Spur, another short spur named after Edward Riley, the rancher. And as you can see, I like to call this program PGE or PD. PD, pre-drone, PGE, before Google Earth. As you can see, there really was no access to Wiley's Spur, but you can get pictures from across the valley. Archaeologists, when they look at railroad grades, look for definitive methods of defining them. And in this case, you can see that disturbed soil never grows back as it was before. And in the right-of-way here is covered with sage and a small cut in the far distance. Further up the valley, the right-of-way is demarked by flowers. And these are big hay meadows, and they produce large crops. The next spur up the valley, there were 4 spurs, or 4 sidings, I guess we call them, on this line. It was Teachouts, and it was named after Henry Uttard and Allen Teachout. They were ranchers at the time. And above Teachouts, we have another unusual feature that historic archaeologists use to identify railroad grades, and that's parallel lines of trees and bushes. We call these poop lines because we believe they were created by birds sitting on the telegraph wires and defecating the seeds they'd eaten. And the rows of trees grew up parallel to the railroad line. Finally, we arrived at an area that's called the Narrows and Hinckley Siding. The valley pinches down for about a quarter of a mile. Excuse me. And there was a siding named after Jake Hinckley's. There was a sawmill here and a stock chute. The road that goes off to the left on the map goes up Mill Creek. And if you're looking for flower pictures in the Ohio Creek Basin, this is a great place to look in the spring. This year there were red, white, and blue. They're beautiful. And the stock chute at Hinckley's is still there. Maybe the last stock chute of the South Park that exists. The mountain in the background is Mount Carbon. As we get on the other side of the Narrows, we come out into where the valley broadens out into a huge set of meadows. And the original right-of-way starts in the bottom left-hand corner and makes a large sweeping turn out to the right and then back on a diagonal to the left. The low mountain in the foreground is Star Mountain Ranch. This is the site of where most of the coal mines on the Baldwin branch were located, and at one time it was possible to walk from one side to the other underground. Today it is a gated community. Star Mountain Ranch was a number of pilots from American Airlines who fly in and out of Gunnison, bringing skiers into Crested Butte, bought the whole mountain up and have subdivided into housing tracts for themselves. Valley to the left is Ohio Creek. Valley to the right is Carbon Creek. And at the head of the valley is where the South Park split into two parts. The right-hand side going up Carbon Creek went to the original Old Baldwin or Baldwin mine. And the left-hand side, of course, was the main line to go up over the top of Ohio Pass. Don't be confused by the use of the name Baldwin, Alpine, Castleton, or Mount Carbon, because there's about 10 of each. And they're scattered all over the mountainsides. This is the original 1882 drawing of Mount Carbon. Today we call it Castleton. And you can see how the Y was arranged. And Castleton, of course, was a platted community. It never amounted to much. There was a creamery located here. There were 4 or 5 storefronts, and that was about it. On the railroad, there was a 2-story section house, a 2-story depot, a water tank, and a number of little buildings, support buildings. This is a Bob Richardson picture taken about a year before the line ceased to operate. This is I guess we call this a northbound coal empty, stopping for water at the tank. The depot would have been back in the background. One of the things I find unusual about this image is the power pole. This is early 1950s, and there was electric power up this part of the valley at the time. This is a Jim Osmond image of the scrap train on the east leg of the Y. The left-hand side is the main line up Ohio. What it would have been the main line up Ohio Pass. We'll take a short trip up Carbon Creek and visit the Baldwin mine and the Kubler mine, where the track makes a left-hand turn and a hook there. On the right-hand side, the red line was owned by a private company. The Rocky Mountain Coal Company built a short piece of track in there, but the South Park operated over it. This is the original town of Baldwin and all the miners' log cabins. This is what it looks like today. This is a gated community, by the way. Following the line on up the valley going to the Kubler mine, you can see the old roadbed again. Again, covered in sage and flowers. And this is the mine at Kubler. And this image probably dates, probably middle 1900s, 1905 or so. The CNS gondola is a dead giveaway. The tail track went on up the valley a ways. And again, we have log cabins for all the miners to live in and all the other facilities. Back down to the divide of the valley again, we're going to go up what was the original, what would have been the original main line. In the bottom right-hand corner, we can see that a branch goes off. This goes to New Baldwin, or Alpine Mine number 2. And the mine looked like this. One of the major problems that the South Park had is that the mines in Baldwin could produce more coal than the South Park could haul out. The mines are capable of producing 20 gondola loads a day, and the South Park was hard-pressed to get that up through Alpine Tunnel, get to the east. Another picture. I like this picture because of the Baldwin station sign. This is what Baldwin looked like in 1983. The waste pile was still quite high, and the concrete foundations at the bottom were for a fuel tank. The property owners were tired of tourists visiting, and so they had the top part of the coal pile hauled away. They used it for part of a road base. And this is basically what it looks like today. The mining town of Baldwin was on the hillside there. That's the old school. And if you look closely in front there by the box, you can see the swing set still there. And again, this is a gated section, private property. On up the valley, we get to a point where the original end of track was at. I should tell you that the mileposts on this can be somewhat confusing because mileposts on the branch, well, milepost west of Buena Vista up Chalk Creek were reset twice. And there's as much as a 2-mile difference between the original milepost and the final milepost. The yellow line is Gunnison County 730, the main road. The green line is what we'll talk about eventually, the coal mine branch. And the dotted red line is what was graded, but track was never laid on. A lot of the original maps are very confusing about all these areas in here. Until you get up to about where the black X is at the top, you're still on private property. And the dotted red line is there. Each one of those dots basically represents a GPS location that I shot by hand. So I've walked all of this. This is what the grade looks like crossing Pass Creek. We turn and we head over towards the base of the lateral moraine that I showed you at the very beginning. The road construction there has destroyed part of the original grade. Around the corner, this is another fishing cabin, and it's setting on the grade itself. The bush in the middle to the left center of the picture is also on the grade. This is what the grade looks like going downhill. The reason the grade is on the side hill cut is to gain elevation to begin the assault on the pass itself. And also, it's in Pass Creek. It will jump over to the other side at a place called the Saddle. It avoided a big swampy area that the right-of-way would not have been able to have gotten through. At the top of the Saddle, you run into 2 grades. The grade on the left is the original grade. The grade on the right is the coal mine branch grade dropping back down to the valley. This is on the Evans property. And Tom Evans is one of the people that I met at the gate with a shotgun. It's a kind of a fun story because after a lot of quick talking and some explanation on my part, I convinced Tom that I was harmless. I was invited to the cabin for coffee and biscuits. The cabin has no running water, no electricity, and no telephone. And the biscuits were baked in a wood-burning oven. They were quite tasty. Tom was quite a character. When I asked permission to be on the property, he said, okay, fine, you can go over wherever you want. He says, how do you plan to explore the property? And I said, well, I usually walk. And he says, oh, no, you can't walk on my property. I said, what do you mean? He says, take my Japanese mule over there. I said, your Japanese mule? And he says, yeah, my ATV, you can have it for the day. So I had motorized transport for the day. The grade continues up the side of the moraine, keep gaining elevation until you pop out into a series of big meadows. This is another dry cabin, by the way. Off through a series of cuts, onto a side hill cut again. It's got a lot of deadfall on it until you pop out back into a meadow again and back into the main part of Ohio Creek. And most of this was all ready for track. A lot of it is sloughed off since, of course, 140 years ago. This is another one of the original 1882 drawings of what the line would have looked like if it had been built with all the curve data and everything included. And you can see that the stream running right to left is Ohio Creek. There really isn't a name for the stream running up and down, but a lot of people call it Mill Creek, and I'll explain that here in a minute. You can see at the top of the drawing there is a loop to reverse directions. As you work your way up through the aspen forest, it's very hard to find the right-of-way. It's there. This is actually a temperate rainforest, and there's a lot of ferns and undergrowth in through this section. as you make your way through, you get a lot of scratches if you're in shorts. Till you pop out on the section where you combine again with Road 730. This is a fishing spot called the Beaver Ponds. From this point up the valley, you are on Road 730. The right-of-way and the road share the same route. And it's a beautiful drive, to be very honest, this part of it. We've made our way up past milepost 227, and we're going to arrive where the red line takes off onto the right. And this is what it looks like. I call this Richardson's Curve. This is where Richardson stopped his 5 compatriots for the day and said, "This is a railroad grade," and they finally agreed. You walk through, you can drive down this road, by the way. It's pretty much a high-profile road, but you can actually get a passenger car in there. Just after you get past the pine tree, it opens up into a big circular area. It's really a great place to camp. And you look up, and you can see the Ohio Creek Palisade Wall. And you can also see the scree fields to get to it. This is what it looks like from across the valley with a long lens. By the way, it's not a bad place to take aspen pictures in the fall. The upper right-of-way is 300 feet above the lower one, about 30-story stairwell hike. It's not like going up a set of stairs, I can tell you that. The wall would have been about 250 feet in length. It would have averaged 6 to 10 feet in width, probably thicker at the bottom. There is an active stream that flows underneath the wall. If completed, it would have been 28 feet high at the highest point. East to west, it ran on about a 3.7% grade. There is no cut stone in this wall. The stone shatters easily. The stone is all hand set and interlaced. There's no mortar. The stone is granderite porphyry, a very large grain igneous rock. It averages about 180 to 200 pounds per cubic foot, or up to 3,240 pounds per cubic yard. And I did bring a piece of granderite for you to look at it, setting up on the table up here. See if I can, right there, so afterwards we can take a look. This is a large earthen fill that you cross to continue up the grade, the old grade. This was all completed and ready for track. This earthen fill also has an active stream underneath it. When you look at it, when you explore down along the base of it, it's hard to figure out how the water's getting underneath, but we'll get an idea here in a minute. Further up the mountain, you run into the scree fields. At one time, the Forest Service allowed 4-wheel drive vehicles to drive up this far. That's why the rock is so white, while the rest is more natural color. This is not a place for flip-flops or untied shoes, because every step a rock will turn. And I still have not quite figured out how you lay track across that, but apparently the South Park knew what they were doing. Looking back, we can see the east end of the Anthracite Mountains. In some places, the grade is not well defined. I believe probably there was a wagon road up this at one time. There was over 300 men working in the valley, grading during construction. Some places you find little rock walls holding back part of the hillside. There's also a creek that comes down through here. And here's a detailed map of showing where we're at. The red dotted line, there's actually a railroad grade there. The black lines are more trails or incompleted grade. And the yellow line is some trails, some just cross mountain hiking. It can be quite exciting. Finally, at the top of the valley where the loop begins, you arrive at what I call the lower landing. It's a fairly graded out area, and it looks down upon another fill that was under construction. This is all blast rock that's been hauled out and dumped onto this fill. again, there's a live stream that runs underneath the fill. This is what it looks like from the bottom looking up. The rock shatters when it's been blasted by black powder. It's almost impossible to cut any kind of a shape with it. This is the going into the loop itself. You have a couple of cuts and another fill, and this fill is completed. And again, it has a live stream that flows underneath it. And then we get to the upper fill where we really get to see how these streams are focused underneath. The South Park construction crews built stone culverts that were buried underneath the fills. And basically the construction of the culvert was 3 parallel rock walls, hand-laced, with 2 channels down the middle and large capstones placed over the top. And these extend for about 400 feet. I still don't have any idea how they were built, how these men maneuvered these large slabs of rock around. Some people suggested that tripods were used and that horses and mules drug the large pieces down, and they were hand set by individuals. Another shot looking down into them. Water does flow through this. When you make the complete loop, you come out on the top and you're at what I call the upper landing. At the upper landing, the trail kind of disappears and you have to bushwhack your way through the woods to follow what was the right of way. In some places, it looks like this. The aspen trees come in very handy, especially when you start to fall. The rock is very sharp. In some places, it looks like this. That's actually a trail across there. If you know where to look, there are actually stone pylons that mark the route, but you have to really search for them to find them. Until finally you arrive at this partially completed cut. This is blasted with black powder, and you can see that basically it's mostly shatterstone. And this leads out to the view of the rock wall itself. This is a pre-drone shot. I climbed another couple hundred feet up the mountainside to shoot down on. It really doesn't give you a perspective for this wall. It is an amazing piece of construction. When the wall would have been finished, it would have been backfilled on the uphill side where the railroad grade is set on. And there is a live stream that flows down underneath this. So we know that there's a set of culverts underneath the rock wall also. Getting down closer, you can get a little bit better idea of the back side of the wall itself. No mortar, all hand laced. This is looking from east to west. The wall actually is curved. What I find amazing about the wall is here's the face of it from the bottom looking up. In the pictorial supplement, the drawings show cut rock in the face, but there is none. This is all hand pieces. It's quite a job to get down to the bottom and get back up again. You can imagine. There's a lot of loose rock. You have to be really careful. And here's what it looks like on the edge. Looking back into the wall, you can see how all of the individual pieces have been laced together. And from the west looking east, you can see the curve in the wall itself. First time I was up there, these large rotten trees were still solid. I've been visiting this wall since 1983. To get further up the grade, you have to basically climb down below the wall and around and come back up. There's a river rock that never was excavated. You come back out into an area where the grade is still there, or you can find it. There are actually, if you look carefully, you can actually find some survey stakes. They aren't from 1881-82. They are from 1890 to 93. And you continue on and you can see where the cliff face has been blasted away to create the grade. And you get to the far end and you run into this rib of rock that kind of marks the end of construction in this section. But you can go on around that if you like. Across the valley, it looks like this. And on the side of the mountain, it looks like this. I've made it across this twice, and I'm under strict orders from my daughter and my wife never to do it again. And I can understand why. Until you finally reach the top of the grade where the road and the railroad grade come together. And if you drive this road and you get to this point, this is where a lot of people from the flatlands panic, because it goes downhill on about a 20-degree angle. And we still see people up there trying to pull 40-foot trailers. The completed grade continues over the top of the pass, turns to the left and goes out into the middle of a big meadow. At one time, this was actually a beaver pond. And on the left-hand side, we have an avalanche slope that comes down. I can hardly imagine what operations over this pass would have been like in the wintertime. This area sees 200 to 300 inches of snow every winter. And that ends our trip over the original main line. In 1886, 1887, a gentleman by the name of William Hines discovered a coal bank or a coal seam at the bottom of the pass. And he convinced himself that the coal seam could be coked. Cooking usually requires coal to be cooked in an enclosed feature with no air getting into, and the idea is that you burn all the impurities out of it and you end up with pure carbon. The most important fact about coal is it has to retain its shape. It can't be crushable. And one of the things that Hines didn't figure out is that his coal wouldn't coke. But he still induced a number of investors into financing the mine, financing coke ovens, and financing the extension of the railroad. This is the coal mine branch. The name of the mine, interestingly, he called it the Mount Carbon Anthracite Coal Mine, but the coal was bituminous, not anthracite. The branch was constructed in the middle of the winter. Hines hired a grading contractor out of Denver, Colorado by the name of Wilson. Wilson brought his grading crew over. They basically dug down through the snow to the frozen earth and managed to lay out a real basic road bed. Hines provided all the ties and the bridging material, and the South Park provided the iron and the technical skill, the surveying to put it together. Basically a frozen railroad. This is the top part of the mine spur, best description, the mine branch. It goes downhill from the saddle, continues until it reaches the bottom of the Ohio Creek Valley, and then goes across the meadows until it connects with Road 730. And this view always amazes me because hundreds of people travel this road. You would think they would look up and see the wall and the grade and want to visit it, but they don't. They just drive through. At the base of the grade was King's Ranch, which was a stage stop on the original Gunnison-Irwin Road. And it was right across the valley from the coal mine. This is the approach fill. I know it's hard to tell from these what's there. It's so overgrown. This is the mine at it itself. Hines managed to drive a tunnel into the side of Mount Carbon 1,000 feet long and did find a coal seam that was over 7 feet thick. This is the hole in the ground as it is today. We won't talk about the mine acid weights, the straining out of it. The coke ovens that he had built were not what we're used to seeing. They were not the beehive shape that we associate with most coking operations. These were of a European design, and Heinz had all the material, cut stone, fire brick, and sand brick hauled in. It probably came by train to Baldwin and then came by wagon up the valley about 4 miles. There were 20 of these little ovens. They were shaped more like a bake oven, like you're going to bake bread in. This is all hand-cut sandstone from down the valley. And this is a drawing that I did when I explored and measured all of the coke ovens themselves. The flat platform at the top was where the burned coke would be raked out and allowed to cool before it would be loaded on railroad cars. The ovens were probably fed overhead, but we don't know exactly how they were because there's nothing left of them to see. Whoops. And we know that at least one train operated on this branch because the assistant division engineer was severely admonished by management for running a train up this far over a frozen right-of-way. At the time, there were 2 locomotives that were stationed in Gunnison. One of them was this one. This is Denver South Park and Pacific number 51. 52 was also there. There's a kind of a unique story about these locomotives. In 1878, the Santa Fe bought 4 narrow gauge locomotives from Baldwin. They were delivered during 1879, and with the end of the Royal Gorge War and the tripartite agreement that ended the war itself, the 4 locomotives became surplus. They were leased to the South Park. They were Santa Fe 301 through 304. They were identical copies of the Rio Grande locomotives, the class 56, the 5,600-pound locomotives. The South Park liked the locomotives so well that they ordered 3 of their own. So this one is a duplicate except for the stack of the Santa Fe locomotives and the Rio Grande. This is, of course, up at the Colorado Railroad Museum. And Heinz's dream of being able to coke coal out of Mount Carbon came to a deadly end. He went bankrupt. He never paid for the grading that he contracted for. The South Park walked away from all of it also and pulled the track up. By springtime, the frozen earth had given way and the track looked like a roller coaster. Jump forward 6 more years. 1892 to 1893. Great Floresta, Ohio Pass Railroad War that probably nobody's ever heard of. In the fall of 1892, the Colorado Fuel Company, what ended up being CF&I Steel, planned to open the Floresta mine. And the Rio Grande began the construction of the Floresta branch out of Crescent Butte, up Coal Creek. Union Pacific Coal Company also owned property in the Floresta area, and so they were determined to open mines at the same time. And so a competition developed between the Rio Grande and what was now the Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison Railroad to open lines up over Ohio Pass from Gunnison. A new survey took place. The whole line was resurveyed again. Plans to finish the rock wall and finish the route over the pass came into play with new heavier ties and rails. Both companies engaged in winter surveying and grading in 300 inches of snow. The Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison grading crews slept in tents all through the winter. Well, not all the way through the winter, till February, when they finally convinced management that they should be allowed to build a log cabin to stay in. The red line is the grade that the South Park was working on. The black dotted line is the Rio Grande. They are only separated by a couple 100 feet horizontally, but about 100 feet vertically, with the South Park being on the top. So every time they threw a shovel full of snow over the hillside or a shovel full of rock, it landed on the Rio Grande crews down below. Got to be so bad that the Rio Grande actually armed their crews. There were a couple of dynamite blasts, or not dynamite, powder blasts that took place that ran quite a bit of material down on the Rio Grande. A couple of their men were hurt pretty bad and were taken out. This went on all through February of 1893, when finally conditions were so bad that most of the crews spent their days digging out the snow to find the work they'd done the day before. And like I said, it's not unusual for this area to have 200 to 300 inches of snow. In Gunnison, they call that a 4-wire winter. The snow by Thanksgiving is over the 4th wire of a barbed wire fence. This is Floresta, what it looked like when it finally was built out. This is the largest coal breaker west of the Mississippi River. The Floresta mine itself was across the valley at the bottom, and it was an unusual mine in the sense that the coal did not lay in a very flat plane. It was on like about a 35-degree angle. And they actually mined the coal from the bottom up, and it would slide down a chute to the bottom of the mine. And then it would come up the tramway that runs up from the bottom to the top to the breaker, go through, be crushed, and then loaded into rail cars. On the hillside behind the pine tree in the middle of the picture, you can see 2 horizontal lines. The bottom line is the completed Rio Grande Floresta branch, narrow gauge, of course. And the line above is what the partially graded Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison line looked like. Here's the snow at Floresta. Like a lot of places, the Rio Grande had a horrible time keeping this line open, and a lot of times the mine would have to suspend operations because they couldn't get cars to haul the coal out. This is what it looks like today. The Rio Grande grade is still very evident. The South Park grade, I've hiked that hillside a couple of times. You can find little bits and pieces of it, but it's not easy to find. And this is the basin Floresta sets in. The building on the left, about halfway up, is the powerhouse, and the breaker was just to the left, to the right of it. This is the backside of the anthracites. Eventually, in March, the Rio Grande and Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison came to an agreement. The Gunnison would give up building its route around over the top and would use the Rio Grande, and they would build a connector from the top of Ohio Pass where the word compromise is. It would have been a very steep piece of grade that South Park or Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison trains would have had to climb back up over the top of Ohio Pass on. In the spring of 1893, the Ohio Pass War ended with the UP bankruptcy. And with that, all work for the Union Pacific Coal Company came to an end, and on the Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison also. The South Park continued to operate the Baldwin branch all the way up until 1910, when the Alpine Tunnel collapsed for the second time. It really was only a minor collapse, but Frank Turnbull, the head of the Colorado and Southern, decided it wasn't worth opening the mine up again. And so just after the first of the year, the Colorado and Southern and Rio Grande exchanged track. The Rio Grande gave up the Blue River branch. It went over the top of Fremont Pass down to the area around Breckenridge. And the Colorado and Southern gave up the Baldwin and Pitkin lines to operation for the Rio Grande. And of course, the Rio Grande continued to operate both branches until, not the Pitkin branch, they pulled it out earlier, but the Baldwin branch remained in operation until 1955. It was the last piece of the original South Park to be operated as narrow gauge. And here's the timetable that they operated under. This is a Rio Grande coal train coming up the valley. This is another Bob Richardson picture. The light bridges, the South Park bridges on the branch, are one of the reasons why this locomotive survived. They were weight limited, and the Rio Grande couldn't use any of their big power on the Baldwin branch, so they had to use the little 268. And it was the last engine to operate on the branch. It's preserved now and out in City Park in Gunnison. And basically our journey's over. Some of the old timers of Ohio Creek say that when the aspens turn to gold and the first frost whitens the anthracites, that late at night the murmur of men's voices and the clank of stone on stone can be heard as the workmen return to finish the wall. Thank you very much. I hope we've convinced you all to go visit Ohio Creek. All the Baldwin locations are basically on Star Mountain Ranch. It's a gated community. It's an interesting group. You can get a hold of some of the people. You can find cell phone numbers for them. And they are very open to letting you come on the property. But they want advance notice. That's true of most of the people in the valley. They're really nice people, but they don't want you to show up and just invite yourself in. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Don't be shy.
How long were you working on all this research, Larry? Did you say 40 odd years?
I started exploring the right-of-ways in 1983, and I'm still at it. That's the crazy thing. The question was what kind of artifacts? On the upper part of the loop on the stone wall, nothing. There's at one time there was a black powder can was found in one of the cuts, but I've looked for construction camps and can't find them. We almost lost that valley where the loop is. In the 1990s, the Mount Edmonds project, which was a molybdenum mine upside of Crested Butte, was going to turn that valley into a tailings pond like Climax. But the citizens of Crested Butte were so adamant about that, about the whole project, they finally managed to get that killed. As a part of that, there was a private archaeological company that was hired to do a survey of the whole valley. And they had 8 or 9 people working there a whole summer and could not find anything of a construction camp. So when they left there, they took everything. In the back part of the loop, there's an area that appears to be an area where there might have been cook stoves or something back in there. At the bottom of the rock wall, down on the bottom of the valley, I'm sure that's where there was a construction camp, and that those men hiked up to the wall every day. I've been up to that wall about every way you can think of, except the scree field. I've never tried that one. That's just insanity. But there is a really easy route that you can take off to the very far right-hand side. You go across the earth and fill, and there's an area that looks like it's very disturbed, where I believe there was a construction camp. You can wind your way back and forth up that hill to get up to the rock wall. I've had my 4-year-old granddaughter up there. Yeah, my daughters don't let me go up there alone, but I can drag them up there. It's okay.
Any other questions?
Something else real quick. You have to realize that you're on national forest land. It's all protected by the Antiquities Act. Removing anything from there is illegal. I just share that because we pick up everything. I try to live by the take only pictures, leave only footprints. But yes. Oh, The first two bridges are over the Gunnison. The second bridge is over Ohio Creek. About a quarter mile. Yeah. I really never got permission from anybody to be there. I'll be honest. The gentleman lives in Oklahoma, or he lived in Oklahoma at the time, and I suspect that what he really didn't want was the tax assessor to see the improvements he'd done, which makes sense. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I haven't heard. I know that the Quartz Creek Palisade Wall is all back together again, but I haven't heard if they've allowed traffic on it yet. It's all done. Yeah. The problem on a lot of these places, Ohio Creek is really unique in a couple of instances. You don't see a lot of ATVs or side by sides. They're pretty much banned off Road 730. So you don't see a lot of construction. The right-of-way road that you go up to the loop is actually open to motorcycles. But you don't see very many people up there going across those scree fields. It's just crazy. You do see mountain bikers up there, which I find even crazier. It's only about 1.5 mile walk from the parking place up to the loop itself. And it's not that bad. But you are you're probably at 9,500 feet. So if you're not used to altitude, it's not a place you want to be for very long.
Larry, did you want to tell us about these stones?
Oh yeah, I just
come on down
for fun. I've been standing too long. My knees are locked up. Anthracite coal in Colorado. This is a piece from the Floresta mine that I brought back. And it's just as solid as the day I picked it up. It doesn't flake, doesn't fall apart. This is a piece of the Grandorite porphyry. I hope I'm saying that right. If you want to pick it up, throw it around, it's fine. My wife brings this home and uses it in the garden for footsteps. We haul more rock home then. Others? Yes. Yes. The county plows Road 730 about 1/4 mile above the gate where we get into the property. And the property owners of Wilderness Streams 2 have gotten together and have bought a snowplow to allow people to get into the wintertime. You can have two kinds of winter in Gunnison. You can have an open winter where it doesn't seem to snow very much in the bottom of the valley, or you can have a 4-wire winter. The first year we built the cabin, my father-in-law called me in the beginning of August and said, come build my cabin for me. And I said, Dad, school starts in a month. I'm a school teacher. So I went for a month and I worked on the cabin, and then I worked every weekend all the way up to the beginning of November. We finally got the cabin dried in. His goal was to celebrate Thanksgiving. Well, by Thanksgiving, his pickup truck was buried in the snow and we could walk over it on snowshoes. That gives you an idea what winter can be like up there. Last winter, we had 180 inches of snow on the property. We're at 7,800 feet, so it's pretty high.
Anybody out there on the Zoom call, if you want to unmute yourself, if you have a question for Larry, you could.
Yeah, hi, this is Andrew all the way from New Jersey. Can you hear me?
Yep, we do.
Yeah. I was trying to locate some of these things on Google's aerial, and where Floresta comes up, there's some kind of a building. It looks like a ruin of some sort. Is that some part of the mine that's still there?
That's probably the powerhouse. It's a stone,
Oh, okay.
Stone and brick.
And it looks like it has it's a square building with what looks like some kind of roof trusses.
That would be the powerhouse.
That would be the powerhouse. Okay. And the rock wall that you described, I think I could see it, but I'm not sure. Somewhere, like you said that 730 is part of the grade, and you showed a really good picture of looking on 730 and looking up the side of the mountain. About where is that?
I was going to try to get a map back up for you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Between milepost 227, as it's drawn on this map, and milepost 228 is where the Road 730 takes off from the original railroad grade, makes a steep climb up the wall there, and the railroad grade continues on. I'm not sure if Google Earth will show you that because of the aspen trees. That's one of the problems with Google Earth in this area, is that a lot of the growth hides the roads in the right of way.
Yeah, it does. It does. But you can see some things, and there's something called the Lily Lake Loop Trailhead where it opens up into a meadow.
Yeah, that's up on the top of over the top of Ohio Pass, over in the Floresta area. It shows on the map on the left there. It's kind of in the loop of the red up above.
Yeah, I see where Lily Lake is, and
And by the way, all of that area is private property.
but it's also in the national forest.
It's an enclave inside the national forest.
Oh, I see.
There are a number of places in the valley where the coal mine is located. There's a half section of private property that the coal mine is on.
Oh,
I've never had anybody talk to me or say anything about being on the coal mine property. The Floresta property is clearly gated and marked as private. I had quite a time finding a contact person who finally allowed me in there. It's an interesting area because they've actually done a lot of proactive forestry in there. They've gone in and hauled out a lot of the dead wood to reduce the fire hazard in the area, but that was all privately done.
how do you get up there?
Really
Your
bad in
four-wheel drive, or just?
Well, you don't need four-wheel drive. Good high-profile vehicle, a vehicle with good clearance will get you in there. An SUV may scrape the bottom here and there, but you can get in there. There's actually a road in there. It doesn't show. These maps I'm using are Topo, Colorado. Maps date from about 1960, 65, so they don't show a lot of modern features, but they do show a lot of the old railroad grades. That's why I use them. It's a National Geographic product. You used to be able to buy it. I don't know that it's available anymore. Other questions?
Any other questions here or on Zoom?
Okay, this picture was taken on the old Rio Grande right-of-way. I've walked about a mile and a half downgrade down the valley. I'm looking basically straight south into the backside of the anthracites.
What's that formation up on the ridge?
It doesn't really have a name. It's just the backside of the anthracites. Okay, the other question we had was the last picture, the starry light picture. That's taken off our front porch.
And where is that?
This is in the bottom of Ohio Creek Valley at Wilderness Streams. It's about 27 miles due north of Gunnison. This is another gated community. This is, you hear the description, dark skies locations. This is a true dark skies location. You can see a little bit of the glow of Crested Butte over the anthracites at night, but generally, about midnight, Milky Way's out, and you can see more stars than you could ever count. I didn't see any this year, and I haven't talked to my brother-in-law. I don't know. He lives there permanently, so I'm not sure if he saw any or not. We should go. It's already below freezing in Gunnison, by the way, at the cabin. And the leaves are already starting to change if you're planning a trip. Next couple of weeks should be really good. Well, we'll have to see. Any other questions? Yeah, that's a short time lapse. No, this is about midnight. Starlight. This is a great place to take aspen pictures, folks. A lot of people talk about Keebler Pass as being the premier place in Colorado to go see aspens. Go down Ohio Pass. You won't be disappointed. There was more traffic over Keebler Pass in June than there is usually over the whole pass the whole year because of the Highway 50 bridge out. The only problem with Ohio Pass for taking aspen pictures is it is a dirt road, and a lot of times during the day there is so much traffic that it's just a dust cloud. So you kind of have to plan your adventures up there. Yeah.
It's Andrew here again, from all the way in New Jersey. I've driven over Marshall Pass in a regular car, and there's almost no traffic on that road. And that was in May, I think.
Well, that's unusual. You got over it in May, but that's not unusual. That road doesn't see a great deal of traffic. I would guess on a daily basis, Ohio Pass sees 5 cars an hour. There are a lot of people who live in the Ohio Creek Valley who use it as a shortcut to go to Crested Butte. Anyone else?
Well, thanks for sharing your knowledge with us, Larry. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot.